I love any excuse that I can get to pull this camera out from under my bed and put it to use, because this case contains my 16mm Bolex camera. The Bolex is a 16mm camera that is largely, in its time, for the most part, meant for amateur uses. It is easy to use and learn and get a really good handle on the basics of shooting 16mm. Very recently, Pro8mm sent along some of their brand new 16mm film kits, which is what I'm going to shoot and show off and talk about today. But we're also going to talk a little bit about 16mm in general, because I haven't had a chance to shoot a lot of 16 in a while or talk about it on the channel in a bit either, because you know, it's not the cheapest and always most accessible kind of format to play around with. In the past, Pro8 has been kind enough to send along some of their Super 8 film kits and cameras so that I can play around with those, show those off, and have an excuse to be able to shoot more Super 8 to show for you guys. The 16mm kit is very similar. It is inspired largely by, you know, the old school way of shooting film, where you would get the cartridge or the roll of film and you would shoot it and then you would send it back with a prepaid envelope to cover processing, and now digital transfer. The 16mm film kit from Pro8mm has everything that you need. It has a 33-foot long roll of 16mm film inside of the metal container that protects it from light, an appropriately sized take-up spool for your camera, some information including tips for shooting 16mm, and a prepaid mailing envelope as well. This envelope only includes free shipping if you're mailing your film from within the US. The film kit is only 33 feet, which is about a minute's worth of film. For reference, full rolls of 16mm come in 100-foot rolls, and they look like this. The 33-foot rolls will still fit in any camera that takes 100-foot rolls though. And this film does come on a daylight spool, so you can load this in subdued light without exposing the entire roll. You'll only lose the first couple of feet of your film. But because 33 feet is such a small roll, I want to try and use as much of it as possible, so I will be loading this in the dark. Pro8 supplied me with two of these kits, and they both contain 500 ISO tungsten balanced color negative film. They're also launching 16mm film kits containing 50 ISO daylight balanced color negative film stock this month as well. Both the 500 tungsten and the 50 daylight 16mm film kits are available on Pro8's website for $106. And again, this contains the film, prepaid mailing if you're in the US, film developing at Pro8, and film transfer to a digital file at Pro8 as well. So 33 feet is not a lot of film, but it is enough to get you kind of a taste of 16mm and to learn a little bit about it without going all the way in on a lot of film, especially if you're buying a camera and you want to be able to test the camera. Having a film kit like this where everything is prepaid and you're going to get the developing and the scanning and everything taken care of, and then you can just see the final result, means that it is the perfect way to be able to test out new 16 cameras that you might have just picked up. Because a lot of these things don't always work the way they should if they haven't been used in a long time. So the film kit is definitely really good for that, and something I would recommend, because I see a lot of people hesitant to get into these formats and have to drop a lot of money only to find out that maybe cameras don't work. There is still, of course, a decent cost attached to this stuff, but at least it is cheaper than having to blow a whole new roll of film. Another big thing is that it is double perforation film, and resources for that aren't big. In fact, it's largely Pro8 and the Film Photography Project, and I love them both. And double perf film options means that you can use this film in old cameras, and you're not just limited by only having single perf film, which is what Kodak sells brand new. Double perf is for older cameras, like 1950s, 1940s, 1930s, that would require perforations down both sides of the film. And I've talked about that before. I've talked about an intro to 16mm a while ago. But today, I'm gonna shoot these two 500 ISO tungsten balanced color negative film stocks from Pro8mm. And I'm gonna do just a small variety of things, hopefully on the Bolex with those kits, and show off the footage, but also talk a little bit again about 16mm. Let's just take a closer look at the Bolex before I jump fully into shooting the film. This is my Bolex. It is nothing fancy. It is not one of the super high-end models. It is a late 1950s non-reflex Bolex. Non-reflex means that I use two viewfinders when I'm shooting with this camera. The first viewfinder allows me to see through the lens in the top position, and I can use this for focusing and some idea of framing. And then when I'm ready to shoot, I put the lens in the middle position and then utilize a side viewfinder that approximates framing for that lens's focal length. Non-reflex cameras can be somewhat inconvenient, but can be cheaper, and the lenses can be cheaper as well. The majority of Bolex cameras have a rotating turret on the front of the camera that can hold 3 C-mount lenses. For my camera, I have a 75mm, a 25mm, and a 16mm lens, and they just screw onto the front of the camera here. Bolexes have multiple shooting options, including different frame rates, and the ability to do single frame exposures. You don't have to constantly wind the handle at the side, but instead you just wind it until it stops, and then you put it back into the down position. And this has wound up the spring motor that runs the camera. On a full wind, most healthy Bolexes run for about 30 seconds. Inside the film compartment, the camera will take 100-foot rolls of film on these metal daylight spools. Our fresh film goes into the top, and we close these loop formers so that we can thread up the camera. Engage the motor so that you can run film through it, and then you can thread it into the take-up spool, which is just an empty metal spool that goes in the bottom position of the camera. Now, because this stuff is color-negative tungsten balanced film, it means that it is meant to be shot inside under regular tungsten balanced light bulbs. But if I want to shoot it outside, then I need to filter it using an orange filter. Most Bolexes have a really convenient little filter slot on the side of the camera, so you can put a filter in behind the lens. But my camera doesn't even have that. So I've combined a few step-up rings so that I can put normal-sized filters onto these little lenses. I found that on most of these Bolex lenses, I can put something with a 32mm filter thread onto them. So now I can just use a regular 85 orange filter that will convert daylight to tungsten for the film. So now that I've got a minute's worth of 16mm film loaded up into the Bolex here, I'm gonna do a couple of things with this roll. This is an example of what tungsten balanced film outside looks like unfiltered. It's very, very blue, which is just a difference in the color temperature of the light. So that's why when we throw on an 85 orange filter, everything starts to look perfect. There's a lot of really nice blue and just color in general here, and it does really remind me of how much I love 16mm. Inside, I set up a little scene so that I could just show off some exposure of the 500 ISO stuff. So these lights have tungsten light bulbs in them, so I'm not filtering it, and I'm exposing at 500 on my light meter. The light meter gives me a reading around 5.6, so I do just a bit of over and under exposure with this stuff. So I started at 2.8, and 2.8 gives me a lot of information in the black fabric here in the darker areas, like the Polaroid camera. And as we give the film less and less light, we get a lot more contrast and these deeper shadows, and it really starts to like lose the information in those folds of the fabric and then the shadow and the Polaroid camera in that area there. But definitely the brighter objects in the scene are still visible even if we're going a little underexposed as well. So really, to get the most out of like your shadows in these darker areas in a scene, then I do recommend going like a stop or maybe a stop and a half over exposure on this stuff. For my second roll, I decided to try something kind of fun. Because I recently updated the intro of the videos to kind of give it this like old school 1970s like TV logo production look. A lot of that involved emulating like grain and just like the softness to it that would have come off of something like 16mm. But now I have the ability to actually shoot my intro onto 16 using a really rough home film transfer setup. I just set this up in my bathroom using my laptop screen and the Bolex being a short distance away from it. I also used a program on my computer to manually set the white balance of the monitor screen. So I changed this to be tungsten balanced to match that of the film. It's not going to be perfect, and it's definitely going to be more exaggerated than if it was from film originally, but I don't mind. I'm really happy with how this came out. I could also have just done it as a frame-by-frame advance instead of playing the video and recording at the same time. But I am really happy with how this came out. The halo around the letters here, and I can kind of bring down the blue of the screen that kind of bleeds into it in order to make it look a little better. So sorry to anybody who doesn't like the new intro, but I'm committing to this hard now. The last thing I wanted to do with a little bit of my film is to just show off double exposure on the Bolex, because it's really easy to do with this camera. On the Bolex, you have a frame counter, and the frame counter allows you to keep track of your footage as you're shooting. You can also rewind the film in the camera. So what we need to do is set our film counter to 0 before doing our first shot of the double exposure. For doing the first shot of myself, I actually have a little external motor that can screw onto the side of the camera. Then as we shoot, the frames are being exposed and the film counter is going up. After that, we rewind our film until the film counter sits at 0 again, which means it's back to the very beginning of our first shot. And then we're ready to do the second part of our double exposure. Now, this double exposure didn't go as well as I had hoped, because I actually ran out of film as I was shooting the first shot. I had to rethread the film in the dark, so it's not as precise. And you can tell that because my title is now superimposed over the second shot of my double exposure. But the double exposure does work, and you can see that the darker areas of me, like the background and my hair, has lost information, and that's where you can see through mostly to the background and the plants. But the much lighter areas, like my skin and my shirt, are things that retain information. Overall, film pretty well spent, and now I have a new version of my intro and some sample shots of 500T to show off and to use for reference for my own stuff going forward as well. My Bolex is also shooting regular 16mm, so it gives you the more square area, and it fits perfectly in the middle of the double perf film. If you have a camera that is shooting Super 16, then this film kit is probably not for you, because you'll actually be losing a little bit over the perforations on the right side of your frame. 16mm is not gonna be for everybody. A lot of people are just like fine with shooting Super 8 and sticking to that, or just, you know, not even interested in getting into like the motion picture formats at all. But I do think that, again, like a lot of the Pro 8, Super 8 camera refurbishing and like the kits and the stuff that they have available, their 16mm options and like the 16mm film kit are very useful for the people that like definitely are picking up new cameras or have really old cameras or are looking for just like a little bit of film for like something special. This smaller increment or smaller option that is less than 100 feet definitely will find like an audience of people who are interested in like shooting 16, learning more about it and getting into it. And I can't stress this enough, but 16mm is so damn nice. So like I said, you can check out the Pro8mm website in the description to find out more information on not just the film kits, but like pretty much everything that they do and all the film that they offer as well. Some really specialized stuff as well, including like double Super 8 film in like large rolls, and that is its own topic for another time. And Pro8 and I are definitely gearing up to do something with that as well this year for sure. Definitely, if you're looking for this stuff, as always, I have super enjoyed the results and my experience having work done by Pro8, and I'm definitely looking forward to the chance to use more of the stuff that they offer as well. Thank you so much for checking this out, and of course, as always, thank you so much to Pro8 for sending film along and giving me the chance to shoot more 16, because it has been a while. And hopefully, even if you're not like looking to buy 16 right now, or you're just like not in the market for it, or it's something that you're not even super interested in, I hope that you've learned a little bit about, again, the Bolex stuff, but also getting to see some examples of Kodak's 500T film in 16mm, a little bit of exposure and like single frame stuff. And yeah, I mean, hopefully all of that turned out the way I imagine it will, because I'm recording this before having sent the film back. But hopefully you're getting stuff out of this even regardless of like necessarily being in the market immediately for 16mm. Links in the description for all that stuff, Pro8 and everything. And of course, I'll see you all soon.